Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership podcast, where I get the chance to talk to global leaders and we get to dig into their wisdom and perspective on all things life and leadership. Today, I'm very excited to have Dr. Michelle McQuaid. Michelle, welcome.
Thanks. It's lovely to be with you, Melissa.
Let me share your bio for people that haven't come across you before. So, Dr. Michelle McQuaid's an honorary fellow at Melbourne University's Centre for Wellbeing Science and one of LinkedIn's top 10 mental health thought leaders. Michelle transforms cutting-edge research into practical tools for thriving, and her work's featured in media outlets worldwide, and it's enabled thousands of people in workplaces, schools and communities to care for their well-being, to build psychosocial safety and navigate change with confidence. Now, Michelle, you began your career, you say, as a good girl, achieving external success while losing yourself. And now you say you've traded perfectionism for playfulness, focusing your research on helping women break free from patterns that can destroy their well-being and sense of self. This is an exciting conversation. Why do women still in this day and age feel like society expects them to be good girls? Do we?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question. And to be honest, Melissa, I thought it was just me. So by the time I was in my early 30s, I climbed all those corporate ladders to the top. On paper, life looked great, and I was exhausted and on the verge of burnout, trying to keep up with it all, as I know many of us and your listeners can relate to. And so really started for me, number one, down this path of trying to understand, well, how do we care for our well-being in very busy lives and very complex world? And then starting to take that research and those tools into workplaces of all sizes and types all over the globe. And what I'd hear from many people is, look, the science makes sense, the tools are easy to use, I want to care for my well-being, but I'm just too busy.
Yeah.
So this was my first hint that maybe it wasn't just me. And as a data nerd at heart, then started kind of digging as to, well, what is behind this? What gets in our way? Why don't we prioritize? And it's certainly not just a women's thing. Men also struggle. But what we found were there were different reasons. And what really surprised me was how often these reasons kept coming back to these gendered expectations that we've often grown up with for girls around being good and for guys around being like real men, tough guys, sort of, you don't do that soft stuff. And so I went back to the data and I was like, okay, but surely this is a generational thing. I'm in my early 50s now. Like, I grew up in the 80s, the age of the rom-com and, Disney fairy tales at their
Me
height, all
too.
those things, right? I'm like, maybe I'm just scarred, right? But we just finished a piece of research with more than 1,000 Australian women from 18 plus, and 65% of those women said, you know what, I still feel the need to conform to these good girl expectations of performing perfectly, pleasing others, protecting everyone. And what really stunned me was it was the youngest women between about 18 and 34 years, 77% of them, Melissa, were saying, I really do feel I have to conform to this. So yeah, it's not unfortunately done. It's not just us. The good news is we did find women breaking free of it. We can talk about how that happens if you want.
Brilliant, brilliant. I have a daughter in that demographic that you've
Yeah.
studied. So it was going to be a question I was going to ask you, like, have we moved on? Is it just us or is it still there? And you've answered that. So what is the cost of this good girl expectation? I mean, what is it? And what is this cost for women all over the world?
Yeah, so the women in our research tend to consistently identify three particular behaviours of being a good girl. One is that need to perform perfectly, from the way we look to the way we work to the way we love and live our lives. The second one was around pleasing others. So really struggling to be able to set boundaries for the fear that will be described as selfish in order to look after ourselves rather than putting everybody else first. And then the third was around protecting others. And this was one that left me with kind of goosebumps in the research, Melissa, when the women talked about all the ways they were silencing themselves in order not to rock the boat, don't make a fuss, right through to the extreme, of course, of what we've seen with things with the Me Too movement as well. So these good girl behaviours tended to cluster into these themes. And what the women talked about was the reason that we still do it, again, 65% of us across all age groups still going on with this, is that in the short term, we often do get get rewards from being good girls, from conforming and being who people expect us to be, from the pat on the heads when we were little to the gold stars in school to the promotions potentially when we're pleasing others at work and struggling to set boundaries and trying to do it all. But what they also talked about was the long-term cost. And what we see in our research is that often by about the mid-30s, women are starting to find this is not sustainable. They're starting to feel really exhausted, really resentful about why am I doing this for everybody? Who is showing up for me? And often reporting this real lost sense of self. Kind of like, I don't know who I am anymore because I'm so used to being who everybody else wants me to be. So we talk about this as like a junk food love, right? We're so busy trying to earn people's respect and appreciation and affection that it's a bit like a sugar hit where, you know, that first moment where we do it and we get the pat on the head, the gold stars, the rewards, it's like, oh, yes, it feels good. I'm safe. I'm wanted. I'm appreciated. But then what happens is after about 30 minutes, that high wears off and we're stuck with the long-term cost that this is really not great for our well-being, not great for our relationships, not great for our integrity and sense for self. And the longer we stay on that junk food diet of other people's approval, the worse it is for us.
Now, I'm going to share release some books, and I'm going to read the blurb of them because I'm going to read the blurb of them because I think sounds incredible. Perfectly imperfect. So it's a bold adult storybook that redefines traditional tales with messages like pretending to be perfect is never worth the cost, and pleasing others is not why we actually tales. Capturing the real journey of choosing authenticity over approval. This story is crafted to make readers laugh, pleasing others and shout. Yes, it's more than a story; it's an invitation for women to find their voice and ask, choosing authenticity over approval. Now, this story is crafted to make conversation because I want to ask in the first place. And shout, yes, like you talk about the fact more than a story, it's an perfectionist and then traded it for playfulness. So tell us about their voice and the little golden book. Am I living my life on my own terms? Now, I'm going to share, you've released some books, and I'm going to read the blurb of them because I want to settle into this part of the conversation because I want to ask. So it's a bold adult storybook that redefines traditional tales. We talk about the pretending to be perfect is never worth the cost, and pleasing others and then traded it for playfulness. Capturing the real journey of choosing authenticity over golden book. This story is crafted.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a house that was full of trauma and pain. My father was not long back from the Vietnam War at a time where that was a shameful thing to have done in our society. And he had extreme PTSD at a time we didn't understand what PTSD was. So he was self-medicating with alcohol and drugs and having flashbacks, imagining the Viet Cong were in our house and after him, running around with a gun trying to, make himself safe. And so my mother, bless her, was very young. I was at her 21st birthday when she wound up with an unexpected pregnancy with me. They did what you did in the 70s from religious families. You got married because that was what was expected. And then it was just all this pain and chaos, right, for the first 4.5 years of my life, where our brains are really busy trying to, form and our nervous system's taking shape. For mine, it was this very hyper-aroused state because home was not a safe place. My mother left when I was 4.5. My younger sister was 2.5, and she actually had the first no-fault divorce in Victoria, which meant she could leave without having to litigate the reasons she couldn't stay in the marriage. And even though there was plenty of evidence as to why she couldn't stay in the marriage, she didn't have to go through court and share all of that. So this was a big shift for women that were in domestic violence situations to be able to be free. Also, not that long around that time that women could get their own bank accounts without needing their father or husbands to sign for it. So it's easy to take for granted 50 years on. But at my mother's stage, when we were trying to get free, these were big political changes that made a path possible that wasn't easy before. So my mum was a school teacher, was a single mum living in a one-income held house, and there wasn't often a lot of money left at the end of the supermarket shop. But if there was 40 cents on the odd occasion, the treat was you get to go and buy a little golden book at the end of the checkout counter because books are a precious thing in our house, Melissa. And so I couldn't really read, but I saw this book one of these occasions. It had this bright yellow cover, this hand-drawn illustration of a little girl with her hands sort of, folded calmly across her belly, looking all calm and serene out at me. But around the edges, there were these smaller hand-drawn images, the same little girl, but she was pulling her sister's hair and breaking a vase and hiding her head in shame in one. And I really related to those small images because, I'd probably done most of them that day already. Yes. And so I remember taking this book to my mother, and she read the title. It was called Good Little Bad Little Girl. And she's like, "Are you sure?" Because my mother considered herself quite a feminist, not surprisingly, at that time. I was like, yes, I'm sure. And so we bought this book. And so it's story time that night in bed. My sister and I tucked up in our bunks. She started to read this book about all the ways the good little girl was quiet and polite and tidy. She didn't eat too much. But the bad little girl was loud and messy and demanding and emotional. Exactly. And then the big surprise at the end of the book is that the good little girl and the bad little girl are the same little girl. But if you made the good little girl grow taller and taller and the bad little girl smaller and smaller, the last page of the book literally says, then you will be happy and loved. And so, so this was what I grew up on. And my poor mother, bless her, like I made her read this story over and over. I think, Melissa, it was my first self-help book. Yeah. And again, because I knew that I was not good. And, you know, not surprisingly, I don't think any of us are ever really good. We're meant to be perfectly imperfect. But two, I was a really traumatized little kid with no support or understanding as to what was blowing up in my world. All I knew was that perhaps if I was good, I could save myself and my family. And so that was really, those seeds were very deeply sown. The other one for me, just on the perfectionism, was that once I got to school, I did quite well at school. And so that was a very calm and controlled place for me. And suddenly I started getting the pats on the head and the gold stars. And so for me, perfectionism was a way to bring some control back into a world that felt very out of control.
Wow.
Gosh, what a story.
Gosh, what a story.
That is remarkable. I was reflecting as you were saying that. And thank you for sharing, so openly all of those aspects about your background.
And thank you for
sharing. It's so interesting that, you share very openly those aspects about your background.
And
it's so interesting
you can picture
that,
you as this little girl sort of putting onto
you
this book
share
as a
very
how do I do
openly
this.
the sort of trauma.
And yet we all grew up with those aversions.
And
you can picture you as this little girl
ourselves on the way through.
Onto this
How
book
did you,
as a how do I
you
do
start
this?
researching this? Like you talked about
And
climbing
yet
the
we
heights of
all
your
grew
corporate
up
career.
with those
Is it always been this
aversions.
case? I don't know.
Tell me something.
Wow.
Gosh, what a story.
That's ourselves on the way
remarkable.
through.
I was reflecting as you were saying that. And thank you for sharing, so openly
start
all of those aspects about your background.
Like you
It's
talked
so
about
interesting
climbing
that,
the heights of your corporate
you share very
career.
openly the sort of
Trauma.
Has it always been in this space? I don't know.
You can picture you as this little girl.
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing to know is we find in the research between the ages of 4 and 11, most girls have some version of this, hey, be a good girl sort of story, and then you will be happy and loved in all sorts of different forms. So super common, still goes on today for many of us. For me, and again, like most of us, I didn't know that those seeds had been planted so deeply. I thought, again, that junk food love, a lot of the time, it seemed to be working for me. And so if I wanted to be liked, if I wanted to be approved of, if I wanted to get ahead in the world and at work, then those good girl behaviors, there's a lot of people that benefit from them and are very happy for us to continue them. So it felt safe for a very long time. And it really wasn't for me until about that age of mid-30s of having that near breakdown at the top of my corporate career and going, hang on a minute, who am I doing all this for? Why am I doing it? Who said it had to be like this? And I really went then and started studying the science of human flourishing. So I did a master's in applied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. I then spent the next 15 years doing this in workplaces, teaching people, okay, how do we thrive? What are those skills to care for our well-being? And that was huge for me, both personally and professionally. There was a lot of healing in that. There was a lot of purpose in that work. But as we were talking about at the start, both for myself and then watching others, kept butting up against this. Why are we too busy most of the time to do these things we know would help us thrive? And as we started to unpack, well, what are the beliefs that we choose to prioritize some things over others? I kept butting up against this gender idea about, well, I'm so busy doing everything for everybody else as a woman, I don't have any time for myself. And when I started noticing that in myself, I really started to tune into, in our house, the worst thing you could be called was selfish. I grew up in a very religious family, so selfishness was a sin. And so that idea that I would prioritize time in the morning to look after my own well-being than just my kids was selfish. That was like, you don't do that. And you wanted to perform perfectly at work because your boss was paying you and that was your job and that was your responsibility and that was what was going to keep you safe, particularly understandably from my mother's point of view, was if I could earn my own income and never have that that challenge that she faced in her life. And then the protecting others, again, the abuse that happened in my family was absolutely considered not something we talked about. And it's really only been a conversation in the last 7 years as I've done more of this work to go, I'm sorry, that's not protecting anybody, even the person it's intended to protect. We need to be able to be talking about these things if we're going to heal from these things. So for me, it's been a gradual thing. And then I rebought the little golden book. And I was like, I need to rewrite this story. Initially, it was a self-homework exercise. And then as we've been doing this research with women, I was like, actually, maybe it'd be helpful to rewrite this and put it in the world as the perfectly imperfect little girl storybook for women everywhere. And so that's what we've done.
It's amazing how this sort of stuff manifests, and I'd love your professional kind of, opinion on this stuff. But even if I offer myself up as a subject here, right? Like, even if I offer myself up as a subject here, right? Like, absolutely that. Not really wanting to ask for help. Happy to offer someone was coming over, really wanting to ask for help. And the other one that I feel like I've finally broken free of, absolutely, it was like not really wanting to ask for help. Don't have an argument with someone in public. If you want to do that, we better go inside. It's amazing how this sort of stuff manifests. And the other one that I feel like I've finally broken free of, but even if I offer myself up as a subject here, right? Like, don't have an argument with someone in public. If you want to do that, we better go inside.
Don't make a scene. Don't draw attention to yourself. Yeah.
So I remember interviewing Michelle Windsor very early in my podcast days, and she was the former CEO of Bank of Melbourne, and she spoke about perfectionism, and she spoke about the impact it had on her team. So do you see that? Do you?
Absolutely. I think, again, these good girl beliefs, again, we believe they're keeping us safe, but we don't see often the ripple impact that it's having both for us, but for the other people around us, and particularly when we're in leadership roles. So again, if we're in the grip of perfectionism, we have that tendency to want to stay in control and micromanage our team. There's not a lot of permission there for mistakes or learning to be happening for anybody. So we're busy sweeping things under the rug or pointing fingers of blame and shame at each other. So when we're in that grip of perfectionism, because as leaders we are highly contagious, our team tend to feel that that is what's required of them as well, and that there is no space for them to get things wrong either. But equally, we've all worked with leaders who are major people pleasers, right? Who are not great at setting boundaries and say yes to everything. And some of us maybe nodding our heads go, that sounds a little like me. And I can definitely relate to that as well. And so then our team often end up consistently with unrealistic deadlines, under-resourced projects, because we're not willing to go in and advocate for ourselves and our teams in the ways that we need. It's interesting, often when I'm coaching leaders, Melissa, people will say, I can advocate for my team to get a pay rise, but I can't advocate for me. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're not getting the pay rises, nobody's setting the path forward for the women coming behind you to be seen for what they are worth as well. And then the last one, if we're busy protecting others, biting our tongues so we don't make a fuss, getting stuck on that hump of politeness, just fixing it for other people because we don't want to make everybody feel awkward, then we're actually robbing other people of the learning opportunities that they need. So again, I talked about in my own family that silencing meant all of us were stuck. Nobody could heal or learn or grow from it because none of us were willing to talk about it. And so again, I think often we think as women, we're protecting other people by doing that emotional heavy lifting for everybody around us, but we miss the fact that there's nothing kind about that when it ends up robbing other people of the learning and growth opportunities they need to figure out who and how they want to be in the world as well.
Whose terms are the good girls' expectations? You kind of referred to it earlier, but who do they benefit?
Yes, I think this is such an important question. Number one, for us as women who might be recognizing these beliefs, so we don't go away beating ourselves up going, how stupid am I? How did I not see this before? What's wrong with me? I think we need to be really clear. There is a very intricate and holistic grooming of girls around these beliefs. And again, guys get a different set. Girls, it is around this good girl behavior. Some of it, a lot of it, comes from our parents and families, not because they want to take advantage of us generally, but because they want to keep us safe. And so again, the reality is only 50 years since a woman could get her own bank account, we had to be to a large degree compliant in order to have the favour of the men in our lives to be safe, as much as we could be, and to have any form of just knowing there was a roof over our head and food on our table, because we didn't always have ways to earn that income. 50 years is not that long a time, right? And so, again, many parents have taught this to their kids, not trying to take advantage of them, but to keep them safe. And I know that was the case for my mother. That said, there are absolutely people who benefit from us being good girls who do it to take advantage of us. And I do think we see some of this in workplaces, the fact that we are still paid less in the dollar than men to do the same job, the fact that often it is the women on a project propping things up, working all hours, doing the emotional lifting for everybody else in a team or in the room, because we will step in when nobody else will. And again, I think companies benefit from a lot of that unpaid labour and work that female leaders and team members do because of these expectations. And then lastly, is of course our good old friend, the patriarchy, and its close cousin, capitalism, which is, if we're in so much pain, if we're numb to who we really are and what we value, we're out of alignment with ourselves, we feel unsafe, we're worried about what tomorrow brings, we tend to spend money on stuff in order to try to get rid of that pain. So whether that's food or drink or shopping or binging Netflix, and again, all those things in little parts can have their place. But when we're so busy trying to escape the lives we're living because they feel so painful to be in, there is a certain group of people who make money off that from us. And so one of the things we found in the research with the women was really important was, number one, just starting to notice where these good girl beliefs show up. But then number two, starting to ask ourselves, on whose terms and for whose benefit am I about to make this choice? And the interesting answer in that I don't think will surprise you or your listeners, Melissa, is it's rarely when it's a woman answering it, or my terms and only for my benefit. We're pretty good at understanding that we are social creatures. So the best answers to that are a win-win. Bit of me, bit of you. Yes. But what it can't be is constantly at our cost. And it's when it's constantly at our cost that we see so many women by the time they're in their mid-30s really suffering from that sense of exhaustion and resentment and feeling lost.
I want to ask you in a minute how people break free of the beliefs. So I want us to go there. Before I do it, you just made me think of, I did a fantastic interview with Professor Laurie Weingart, and she co-authored the Putting a Stop to Women's Dead End work. And it was research they did around non-promotable tasks. It talks exactly to what you were talking about, women ending up doing a lot more of the office style housework and things like that. It's fascinating read and conversation. So how do people break free of these beliefs? Like, what helps women do that?
Yeah, so a couple of good bits of news. As women get older, they are less likely to keep conforming to these good girl expectations. What we saw in our research is that women 65 plus, less than half of them were still saying, yep, I need to be that good girl. So still a lot of us, but the number is moving in the right direction.
65.
65. It's like, it's too late, Melissa. We need to get there earlier.
Yes.
So when we looked at them and the other women along the journey, again, there were women in every age group that were like, yeah, I see it, I choose not to conform to it. There were 3 skills in particular that they suggest that we can keep all building. The first is self-compassion. Yeah, so to be that wise and kind friend to ourselves, rather than expecting ourselves to be perfect, and then using self-criticism and self-judgment to beat ourselves up when we feel that we're falling short. So again, nature made us all to be perfectly imperfect so that we could learn and grow, adapt and evolve as the world around us and within us keeps changing. So we can kind of leave that need for perfectionism at the door, complete bullshit. None of us are, ever, never going to be. So, maybe drop that one. Let the house be messy when somebody comes over. That's my personal one I'm working on as well, Melissa. And instead, I love the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, for example, at Stanford University around our growth mindsets of just acknowledging that when it's not perfect, we're just not there yet. So be a Yeti is Carol's encouragement. I haven't learnt that yet, haven't mastered that yet, haven't figured it out yet. It's kind of acknowledging that we're all learning and growing every single day is the beauty of this life. And so if I'm not there yet, It just means I'm a work in progress just like you are. So self-compassion and using less of that self-criticism, self-judgment is really important for us to help break free. The second one is around secure attachment. So we may have heard about secure attachment in relation to our parents, how we grew up when they went away. Did we feel safe that they'd return, that they'd hear us and see us and advocate for us? Kind of hard to go back and fix that one. We've also heard about secure attachment to our romantic partners. And so if you've got a great romantic partner where that's working, yay, not for everyone though. And then what I love about the new secure attachment research is it's looking at secure attachment to self. Will I, at this moment in my life, show up for myself? Will I advocate for myself? Will I not abandon myself in order to make everybody else feel okay? And so beautiful research from two therapists in the US called Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. They have a wonderful book called Secure Relating, came out last year. And they really look at how do we train our nervous systems so that we can stay more in our connection circuit with each other and securely attached to me and you. So we're figuring out those win-wins versus triggering protection circuits where I abandon myself in order to make you feel okay. And really simple somatic one I love here is called a butterfly hug. And you can do it by just placing, crossing your fingers over each other. So your fingers are kind of coming either side, a bit like a butterfly wing there, and the thumbs of the body in the middle. And we can put it on our chest and then just gently breathing in. And as we breathe in, just tapping on our chest as we breathe out, and then breathing in. And tapping a couple of times on our chest as we breathe out, a bit like a butterfly wing fluttering. And you can find whatever rhythm works for you. You might like to breathe consistently and tap. You might like to alternate, tap one side and then the other side of the chest, whatever feels nice. But it's this piece again to just help settle our nervous system and just remind, hey, I'm here. I gotcha. It's okay. On whose terms, for whose benefit am I going to show up now? So that securely attaching to self is one of the other key skills. And the last one is around self-leadership. And here we can think about self with a capital S for the self, based on the internal family systems research that started to become more popular the last few years. And in internal family systems, we think about that we all have this self with a capital S who is curious and creative and compassionate and courageous and confident and clear. Like we've all had those moments. And the good news is the research in internal family systems says we're all born with that. It is innate within us. But what tends to happen as we're growing up and we're not always so well resourced to navigate life is we also tend to develop these protective parts of us, like the people pleaser and the perfectionist and the like, who try to keep us safe when they feel worried about the world. And often as we've grown up, those younger parts don't realize that now I'm a 52-year-old woman with a few more resources. I can say no when I need to, and it can be a whole sentence. And so what we're doing here is working with those younger parts to be in that kind of conversation with them, to say, hey, perfectionist who needs to clean the house before everybody comes over, are you feeling a bit nervous? Maybe you don't know this person so well. Maybe you're worried what they'll judge you for or say to somebody else after. But it's okay. They're coming to see you, not your house. And if your house is a bit messy, maybe that'll give them the permission to make their house a bit messy as well. And so how do I be that self with a capital S for those parts of me that perhaps are a little bit more protective, either from capital T or lowercase t traumas that I'm maybe still carrying with me but don't realize yet? And so these three skills we find any of us can build is the good news. Wealth of research, tons of tools. We have a journal book available with the storybook that has lots and lots of easy ways that we can reach for these things.
Amazing. So as I reflect back on that, so we've got the Yeti tool.
Yep, be a Yeti.
Yeah.
Butterfly hugs.
The butterfly hug that I awkwardly, for anyone, if you're listening, you won't have had the benefit of seeing me awkwardly try and copy.
Okay, we're just playing. We're just not there yet, Melissa. That's okay. That's the invitation to keep playing. And then the self-leadership tool is around starting to talk to these parts. So when you notice them, oh, my perfectionist is getting ready to clean the house in a frenzy before Melissa comes over. Sort of go, hey, you're okay back there? Like, why are you feeling the need to do this? Do you need a hand? We might just need to do it today because we're not ready to let it go yet. That's okay, no judgment. Or, hey, do you want it? Maybe we'll just leave like the corner of the rug out a little bit. That's enough this time. So knowing that those parts aren't bad, they're not trying to hurt us, they're just bits of us that are still growing up, and to meet them with that love that we would anybody else in that situation.
What a beautiful focus your work has, and what a wonderful story about that book. The book will be such a incredible help to people. Where do people find the book?
Yeah, so Amazon, in whichever country you're in. Again, there are the two books. The Perfectly Imperfect Little Girl is the adult storybook. There is a bit of swearing in there, so maybe not for young kids. Maybe your teenagers might be okay. And then the second one is the Perfectly Imperfect Women's Journal. And that one has a bit more of the memoir of my story and my colleague Evie, and it has full of evidence-based tools for each of those three skills you want to build.
Amazing. Now, can I ask you the final question I ask everybody, which is, from your perspective, Dr. Michelle McQuaid, what does brave feminine leadership mean, and do you think it needs to change?
Yeah, I absolutely do. Number one, I think we often think brave feminine leadership only means women. And I think those feminine capacities are within all of us, and we need more of those feminine capacities across our workplaces. And if I think about what those are, they are so much of that curiosity and creativity, connection, compassion, courage. How do we bring those to the fore? And for me personally, it's more about asking each day on whose terms, for whose benefit, and looking for the win-win, that I don't need to set up win-lose scenarios, because I think if one person's losing, eventually we are all losing. I think you only have to look at how divided our world has become on that front. So how do we use those feminine skills to keep creating more win-win outcomes in our world?
What an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining me and the conversation, Michelle.
Thanks, Melissa, for having me.